Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. My name is Riley Hart. I'm an investigative reporter. I'm chasing a story that doesn't fit the shape of anything I've covered before. No editor is waiting on copy. No deadline. Just a question that's getting harder to ignore. Why did half the city's emergency funding vanish into contracts no one will talk about? It starts with something small, a procurement trail, a logistics firm I've never heard of, Logan and Rourke, and a city council vote that happened behind closed doors. I follow it through a stack of sealed files, strange training documents, and a set of coordinates that lead me to a fog-choked shipping terminal. On the Brighton waterfront, it's early. The kind of overcast morning where the light feels too soft and the air carries a weight you don't notice until you stop breathing through it. But something's off. No workers, no trucks, no port noise at all. Just empty concrete, the rust-stained ribs of shipping cranes, and rows of crates that should have been gone weeks ago. Even the gulls are circling wide, giving the place distance. I'm here because something's being hidden, and it feels bigger than one missing invoice or a padded contract. I don't know exactly what I've stepped into yet, but it's not just corruption. I'd come to Dock 14 because of a shipping manifest tucked into a forgotten storage room back at City Hall. The paper trail pointed to Logan and Rourke Industrial Logistics, a private contractor awarded millions through a quiet vote in committee. Their official role was emergency supply distribution, non-perishable food, first aid stockpiles, cold chain medical storage. The documents were vague, but the timing was odd. Contracts were backdated to late December. That didn't match the city's official disaster timeline. There had been no declared emergencies back then, but here I was, standing in front of a wide steel panel warehouse, with its keypad dead and its sliding doors already half open. Inside, the air was colder than expected, not freezing, but cooled unnaturally, likely from power still running to internal refrigeration units. Rows of pallets stretched across the space, some already unwrapped and half looted. Pallets marked "Executive Transport Only" were empty. Those labeled for regional distribution were sealed, but missing inventory tags. I made my way through the rows, snapping quick photos, making mental notes. There was a manifest board mounted to the wall near dispatch, a whiteboard caked with old fingerprints. According to the logs, 4 trucks had departed between March 7th and March 10th. None had returned. Each listed only a 3-letter code instead of a destination: PRT, NTZ, DRX, and SCL. That wasn't standard. Even emergency halls used GPS-tracked routes with formal manifests. This was something else. The floor creaked behind me. I froze, waited. The sound came again. Soft, deliberate, metal on metal, like a freezer door shifting against rust. I moved slowly toward the rear of the warehouse, where a line of cold storage units stood in silence, their seals marked with hazard tape that had been pulled loose. One door stood open an inch. Frost clung to the seal. I knocked once. No answer. I pushed gently. The light inside flickered and revealed 2 people crouched behind a rolling rack of water jugs. They were wrapped in thermal blankets, faces pale, eyes ringed with exhaustion and something worse: resignation. The man, probably early 40s, wore a company badge clipped to his collar. Evan Dresser. His knuckles were bruised and stained dark with old blood. The woman, younger, mid-20s maybe, had a small flash drive clenched in her right hand. Her fingers locked so tight I had to pry gently to take it from her. Her name was Dana Trill, night shift operations. At first they were silent. Then Dana started whispering. It came out all at once, disjointed, like she was still trapped in it. 3 nights ago, a supervisor named Joel started seizing near the loading bay. He collapsed, then got up again a few minutes later without saying a word. Walked calmly into the distribution office and attacked one of the new drivers. Evan said Joel's eyes didn't look right. No recognition, no panic, just fixation. Security tried to intervene. One of the guards hit Joel hard enough to dent a locker. He didn't even flinch. He kept walking. They locked him inside a steel container used for DF waste holding, thinking he was in some kind of psychotic break. He broke out less than 2 hours later. I asked if they saw where he went. Evan just shook his head. Dana told me that afterward, people started disappearing. Drivers, maintenance workers, even the daytime janitor. Nobody sounded any alarms. No calls to the authorities. They told us to stay put, she said. Said it was just a personnel issue. They brought in these people from out of state wearing matching jackets, like contractors, but not local. Said they were helping with emergency prep. I asked about the flash drive. Dana said she found it inside Joel's jacket after he was gone. She didn't know what was on it, just that the folder was labeled Chemical Training Exercise Sim PHX V6. I dropped it into my jacket pocket. They hadn't eaten. I split the last protein bar in my bag and gave them both bottled water from the glove compartment of my car. They didn't trust me at first, but I told them I had contacts at City General, that I could get them seen without getting officially processed, that if this was a chemical exposure event or anything like it, they needed to be looked at by someone who hadn't bought into whatever Logan and Rourke was doing here. Evan hesitated. Dana didn't. She was done hiding in freezers. I called my mother from the car. She'd been a nurse for 30 years before retiring from City General and still played cards every other week with a few of the older trauma staff. She didn't pick up, but I left a message asking her to call Dr. Miranda Hale, an infectious disease specialist I remembered from some of my earlier coverage. If anyone would keep quiet, it would be her. 20 minutes later, Mom texted back. Miranda is still there. She'll meet you around staff parking, South Wing. I didn't tell her about the warehouse. Not yet. We reached the hospital just past 9 a.m. No sirens, no checkpoints, just the usual traffic slowdown near emergency drop-off. I drove around the back to staff parking like we were told. Miranda was waiting by the rear entrance in an olive-colored overcoat, holding a clipboard she clearly didn't need. I recognized her immediately. Grey streaks in her hair now, but the same sharp eyes. She gave me a look that said we were going to talk later. Then she motioned Evan and Dana inside without asking too many questions. We sat down in an empty break room while they were checked in under fake names. Miranda shut the door, dropped her voice, and told me she'd seen a half-dozen similar cases in the last week alone. Patients complaining of extreme migraines, sudden fevers, violent nausea. Some reported unexplained aggression. Others showed signs of photophobia, intolerance to light, even when blood work came back clean. One man in his 30s refused to eat or drink anything that wasn't sealed. Another woman was convinced her own skin was moving. She'd tried to claw it off before being sedated. We ran labs, Miranda said. Nothing definitive. Vitals stable. No viral load spikes. No indicators of synthetic contamination. But we're not alone. Colleagues in Chicago, Atlanta, even Denver are reporting almost identical symptoms. It's not in the news yet. No one wants to go public without confirmation. I asked her if I could speak to one of the patients. She looked at me for a long time, then nodded once. "One," she said, "and then you disappear. I'm already putting my license on the line, just by letting you through the door." I agreed. The fluorescent lights above the hallway buzzed faintly as I followed Dr. Miranda Hale down a corridor that didn't appear on the hospital's public map. It was tucked behind the second floor's infectious disease wing, through a double-door stairwell with an old keypad no one seemed to use anymore. Miranda punched in the code without hesitation. She must have done this dozens of times. The hallway smelled like ozone and old gauze, that mix of disinfectant and something metallic that clung to older hospital wings. We passed 4 empty exam rooms before stopping at one with the blinds drawn tight. "This one came in 2 days ago," she said quietly. EMS found him collapsed behind a strip mall dumpster off Edison Parkway. No ID, no phone, no trackable prints, no record in any system. Gave a name, Jeremy Cole, but we don't think that's real. He was agitated the first few hours, then completely calm. Now, I'm not sure what to make of it. He's lucid, but... She trailed off. I asked what his symptoms were. She handed me a clipboard with an intake summary. Severe nausea, elevated heart rate, photophobia, tremors in the left hand. and acute verbal disorientation during initial examination. Vitals are within tolerable range now, but his memories fragmented. I want you to be careful, Riley. I stepped inside the observation room with the cassette recorder in my jacket pocket rolling. The man looked about 28 or 29. Short cropped hair, faint scarring across his upper left temple, like an old surgical stitch or impact wound. He wore a hospital gown and sat on the bed cross-legged, blinking slowly at the light fixtures like they were blinking back. When he noticed me, he didn't react like someone surprised to see a stranger. He just watched. I asked if he remembered how he got here. His voice was calm, deliberate. I remember the smell of gasoline, cold pavement, something loud, like machines grinding, but far away. And then I was inside, with bright lights, you people in gloves. I asked his name. He repeated, Jeremy Cole, but it came too quickly, a name rehearsed. I asked where he was from. He frowned. I think Phoenix. No, wait. No, that's not right. There was a fire there. That's where the smoke came from. But I wasn't there. I just saw it. He looked toward the wall. I see things I haven't seen yet. His eyes were too dry. He blinked rarely. His voice never rose or fell, just stayed in that same soft register, like he was reading from something memorized. There were scratch marks on the inside of his left forearm, almost parallel. Thin, repeated lines like someone had been trying to get something out from under the skin. Miranda had said he hadn't shown aggression since the first night, but the scratches were fresh. I pressed him gently, asked about where he'd worked, if he had any family in the area. He couldn't give specifics. Every time I narrowed the focus of a question, he got lost in abstraction. There was a hallway with red tiles, he said, and a machine that vibrated. I was told to stay in line. I think I passed the test. What test? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, looked at the window and muttered, Too much light in this place. It drills, right into the back of your eyes. You ever feel that? Like the light is screaming. I stood and thanked him. He just nodded and laid back on the pillow, eyes open. He didn't blink again while I was in the room. Miranda was waiting outside. You see what I mean? She asked. I nodded. It's not just confusion. He's disconnected. We walked back toward the main corridor. I asked if any of the other patients showed similar memory gaps or fragmented language. Some, others are worse. One man wouldn't speak at all for the first 2 days, then started repeating weather reports he couldn't have heard. Another kept asking to be taken underground, said the ceiling was a breathing. They're not hallucinating in the traditional sense, but it's like their minds are unraveling at the edges. Something subtle, but deep. A degradation of continuity. Before I could press her for more, Miranda's pager buzzed. She checked it and muttered under her breath. They're calling me to exam 3. That's Dana. She's showing symptoms. We turned down another hallway and reached a small exam room tucked near the corner where old file rooms used to be. I recognized Dana immediately. She was sitting upright on the edge of the bed, the thermal blanket still draped around her shoulders. Evan stood nearby, arms crossed, jaw locked tight. A nurse was drawing blood, while another logged vitals onto a rolling tablet. Miranda stepped in first, reviewing the data. Her face didn't shift, but I'd learned to read doctors over the years. The flick of her eyes, the slight downturn of her mouth. She didn't like what she saw. Temps at 101.3, blood pressures spiking, pupils responsive but constricted. She's complaining of ocular strain, said the nurse. Dana looked up as I entered, wincing at the ceiling lights. Her skin had taken on a slight grey hue, not deathly, but off, like her circulation had dulled. She blinked repeatedly, trying to focus. Feels like my eyelids are sandpaper, she said. I can't stop seeing static. Miranda adjusted the pulse oximeter and took a second look at the preliminary blood draw. White blood cells elevated, electrolyte levels dropping faster than expected. Creatinine ratio is fine. But there's something odd here. Neurochemistry markers are misaligned. Her serotonin levels are spiking, and she's producing excessive acetylcholine. That could explain the tremors and eye pain. Evan interrupted. We were fine this morning. She was fine. This isn't from being cold. He was tense, not defensive, but bordering on frantic. He wasn't just worried, he was afraid. I asked when Dana started feeling off. She said it began after we left the warehouse. Felt like a low battery, just drained. Thought it was adrenaline wearing off. But then, the nausea started. The room started warping around the edges, like the corners didn't match. She paused and pointed to the back of her neck. Feels like there's pressure. Not pain, just wrong. Like something swelling under the skin. I stepped out of the room with Miranda while the nurses continued the intake. We stood by a broken vending machine humming near the elevator bay. She exhaled slowly. She's showing stage 1 neurological onset, she said, which means either she was exposed back at that warehouse or it started before that, and it's just blooming now. Either way, we don't have long. I asked what stage 2 looked like. Miranda didn't answer right away. Then she said, increased disorientation, spatial dissociation, visual hallucinations, emotional dampening, eventually full dissociative regression. And then, well, there's no formal stage 3 yet. The ones who made it that far didn't stay long enough to study. Her voice dropped. We've had 2 cases this week where patients exhibited complete autonomic override. That means no reflexive reaction to stimuli, but full limbic activity. Movement without intention, like a body operating in default mode. I thought of the man in the observation room, his eyes that didn't blink, his words that didn't feel like his. I retrieved the flash drive from my pocket, showed it to her, told her it came from Joel, the man Evan and Dana said started it all at the warehouse. She didn't take it. Don't plug that into anything here, she said. Take it somewhere safe, preferably not on a networked system. Whatever this is, it's bigger than just Brighton. That's when I heard it. From down the hallway. Not a scream, not shouting. Just a loud crash, followed by a gurney rolling across linoleum and someone yelling, "Restraints now!" Then a voice gasping, shouting through clenched teeth, "Don't let it see you!" Everything went quiet for a moment. Then footsteps. Orders. Commotion. Miranda turned and ran. I followed. But that moment, that phrase, burned into my mind. Don't let it see you. Who was it? What had they seen? I didn't know yet, but I was going to find out. The hallway outside the isolation wing was full of noise, but no answers. After the crash and that strange voice shouting about being seen, security moved quickly. Too quickly, as if they'd rehearsed this. Nurses were pulled aside, escorted out of certain rooms without explanation. A crash cart was abandoned halfway down the corridor. Someone had dropped a vial of heparin, and it lay broken on the floor, dripping into the grout. The overhead lights flickered once, just long enough for every surface to feel slightly unreal, like the textures didn't match their shapes. That feeling passed, but something didn't. Something stuck to the edges of my thoughts. Miranda caught up with me near the nurse's station, her expression unreadable, but her tone sharp and direct. She said it wasn't the patient from earlier. Jeremy Cole was still in his room, they'd just checked, but something had gone wrong in another section of the ward. A patient in Bay 6B had become aggressive during an oxygen adjustment and had to be restrained. I asked her if it was the same patient who shouted. She didn't answer that part. Instead, she pulled me back toward Dana's room. What I saw inside stopped me for a full 5 seconds. Dana was no longer upright. She was lying flat on the exam bed, her legs twitching slightly under the blanket. Evan was no longer pacing, but seated in the corner, with his hands gripping the sides of his head like he was bracing against some unseen force. One of the nurses was adjusting the heart monitor cables, but there was no real rhythm to the movement, just routine going through the motions. Miranda walked in without hesitation and asked for the updated vitals. Temperature, 97.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Blood pressure, 104/67, erratic pulses. Oxygen saturation, normal, but with signs of shallow breathing. Neurological response, delayed, nonverbal. She didn't look like herself anymore. Dana's skin had lost its color in patches, especially around her eyes and neck. The sclera of both eyes had begun to yellow slightly, but not from jaundice. This was something else. A kind of waxen discoloration, like the skin wasn't breathing anymore. When Miranda gently touched her wrist to check responsiveness, Dana's other arm moved, not to resist or cooperate, just moved. A twitch of fingers, a slow curl, and then back to stillness. Her breathing wasn't labored, but it didn't follow normal chest expansion. The body moved, but not with breath, with pressure. Miranda asked Evan what had happened. He just shook his head. She said she was tired, he whispered. Said the walls were too loud and she needed to close her eyes. Then she asked me to turn off the lights, but they were already off. She hasn't said anything since. One of the nurses checked her pupils again and paused. They're not contracting to light anymore. Reflex is absent. Miranda told her to step back. She leaned in and whispered Dana's name. Once, then again. No reaction. Then Dana's lips parted slightly. Her jaw shifted, like it was remembering how to move. There was no sound, no breath, just the faintest creak of motion. That's when Miranda backed off and pulled me outside the room. We stood next to the linen closet. It smelled like bleach and old coffee. She didn't speak for almost 30 seconds. Then she said something I hadn't expected to hear from a doctor who had always, in my memory, valued facts over theories. They're watching us, Riley. I asked what she meant. She looked around first, not paranoid, just methodical, and then led me down to the older administrative wing near the research filing room. Most of this part of the hospital was abandoned after the 2017 flood damage. Nobody came here anymore. She unlocked a door marked Archives Temporary Access and ushered me inside. It was colder in this room. The windows were boarded with plastic sheeting, and the only light came from a single flickering fixture in the ceiling. On the desk was a folder marked HHS BPHC Priority Hold Internal Use Only. The cover sheet was dated February 9, 2029, nearly a month before today's events. She handed me the entire thing. Inside were half a dozen memos, a map of at-risk hospital systems across the country, and several pages of communications between something called the Public Continuity Preparedness Task Force and 3 regional hospital boards, including ours. The language was vague, clearly scrubbed of anything actionable, but it painted a picture I'd feared since I found that contract back at the docks. City General, along with at least 14 other urban medical centers, had been placed under Observation Protocol Gamma, a term that didn't exist publicly. According to the memos, this meant certain facilities were not only expected to report anomalies in patient behavior, but were also being used as passive monitoring zones for a neurological response pattern study. These aren't drills, Miranda said. These are live case environments, and we weren't told what we were looking for. We were just told to flag patients who fit a profile. They gave us a checklist. We thought it was a psych evaluation aid, but it was preloaded, like they already knew what to expect. I asked who they were. She shook her head. No agency name, just task force codes. But look at the dates. Look at how long this has been circulating. They knew something was already in the population. That's when her pager buzzed again. We were both silent. Then a second buzz. Urgent. Code Grey. Room 3C. She didn't need to say it. We both ran. Dana's room had changed. The heart monitor had flatlined 2 minutes prior, and she had been declared unresponsive by the nurse on duty. But before they could clear the room, her hand had gripped the edge of the bed frame hard enough to warp the metal rail. The nurse tried to step back, but Dana stood. Not sat. Stood. Her motion was stiff, like her knees were working out the angles again. Her eyes were open, but not seeing. Her jaw hung slightly open, teeth clenched in odd rhythm. When Miranda and I entered, we saw the nurse on the floor, backing away with her hands cut. She'd tried to stop Dana from moving. Security arrived moments later, 3 staff in padded vests, one holding a restraint pole normally used for psych patients undergoing seizures. They approached cautiously. Dana didn't react. She turned her head slowly toward the sound of footsteps but didn't track movement the way people do. When one of the guards spoke to her, she didn't respond. But when he stepped closer, her right hand shot out fast, too fast, and grabbed his collar. He fell sideways, and that's when the others rushed in. No weapons, just brute restraint and practiced motion. They brought her down hard, pressed her to the floor, and strapped both wrists and ankles. She didn't scream, She didn't blink. She just watched the ceiling, mouth still slightly open, a kind of wet breath pushing through teeth like a whisper that wasn't forming words. I stood there as they dragged her, restrained and silent, down the corridor to an isolation lockup usually used for sedated high-risk patients. The door shut behind her, and I heard the locks engage manually. Miranda ordered full neuro-isolation. I asked if they were calling the CDC. "No," she said. "The order already came from above. We're to maintain status until further personnel arrive." "Who?" I asked. "A separate team, not from the state, not from us." She didn't say more. We returned to her office. Outside the hospital, the streetlights were starting to flicker on. Night was coming. I saw a white van parked just across from the ER entrance. No license markings. 2 men in matching grey jackets sat inside. One held a clipboard. The other was watching the building through binoculars. They hadn't moved in 20 minutes. I stayed at the hospital longer than I should have. There was a moment, just before the sun dipped behind the east towers, when I could have slipped away. My car wasn't blocked in. Nobody was watching me too closely. But I didn't leave. Maybe it was professional instinct. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I just couldn't stop thinking about Dana, about the way she moved after death, the way she looked through people rather than at them. I told myself I was still documenting, still reporting, but really, I think I was trying to understand something I couldn't write down yet, something that didn't make sense even as I watched it happen. The hospital was quieter now, but it wasn't the calm of resolution. It was the silence of a place that had locked its doors and held its breath. Hallway lights had dimmed to low night settings. No overhead pages. No visitors. Even the cafeteria had closed without announcement. A nurse near radiology told me all non-critical departments had been temporarily cleared under the direction of hospital administration. Nobody wanted to say the word lockdown, but that's what it was. Around 6:40 p.m., I saw them arrive. A black SUV turned into the emergency lane at a perfect angle, followed by a matte grey transport van with no hospital or ambulance insignia. The van's windshield was papered over from the inside. 2 men got out first, civilian clothes, but tight movements. One had a radio clipped to his belt with a coiled earpiece. They didn't announce themselves at the front desk. They bypassed it completely and headed straight for the secure hallway between infectious disease and sub-level transport. A third man got out of the passenger side and waited by the van's rear doors, arms crossed. His expression didn't change once. A few minutes later, Miranda found me near the stairwell. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, though I knew we'd just spoken earlier that afternoon. Her voice was clipped, all formal now. "They're from the response division," she said. "Which response division?" I asked. "Doesn't say. I was given an access code, not a name. They requested Dana's location and access to the neuro-isolation records. No briefing, no paperwork, just clearance tags I can't verify against anything." I asked if she was letting them take Dana. She didn't answer. Instead, she asked if I still had the flash drive. We went to her office, then into a forgotten records room with an old standalone desktop that hadn't been online since before the COVID-23 panic drills. It booted with a rattling fan and still had a version of Windows so outdated the toolbar icons looked like toys. That was exactly what we needed. Something air-gapped. Something not attached to the hospital's secure network. The flash drive clicked into place with a soft sound, but the data took a moment to populate. It was mostly nested folders with titles like Training Sim V6, Protocol 12B, and Exfil PNWR. No standard file tags, no docs or PDFs. Everything was proprietary. I used an old reader Miranda had installed from her virology seminar days, and slowly the contents came to life. The first folder, SimPHX, opened into a series of slideshow sequences and encrypted video snippets. The title page read, Phase-Based Response Scenario, Neural Compromise Vector, Urban Live Trial, Logan and Rourke DPT OPS. Confidential, for use only by authorized personnel within Phase 1, 2 and 3 test zones. Miranda leaned forward. She didn't speak. Neither did I. There were photos embedded in the second slide, frames pulled from security footage, time-stamped, geotagged. Some of them looked like City General. Others were clearly not. Older, blurred, but all hospitals. All urban. The patients shown were pale, confused. Notes indicated symptoms matching what Dana experienced. Neurospike anomalies, photophobia, electrolyte collapse, and stage 2 autonomic override. In one clip, a patient is seen sitting motionless for over 20 minutes, then rising, suddenly, only after all light sources are dimmed. We scrolled through more folders. A document titled Deployment Cascade Brighton Trial outlined coordinated timelines for staff training, emergency drills, patient load simulations, and civilian misinformation strategies. The phrase live environment monitoring appeared in red at the bottom. "What is this?" I asked. Miranda's voice barely came out. "They're not reacting," she said. "They're rehearsing." Further down in the root directory was a folder named Exfil Milton. It contained several heavily compressed video files. I played the smallest one. It showed bodycam footage, low light, jittery movement. A man in a containment suit was inside what looked like a long corridor of a hospital basement. You could hear breathing, static, and muffled shouting. Then the man rounded a corner, and something darted past the lens. Too fast to see clearly. He stopped, turned slowly, raised a hand. The thing that came back into frame didn't crawl. It walked. Upright, but not normal. It moved like it was remembering how. One arm dragged slightly behind it. The eyes didn't glow or flash or twitch. They stared straight into the camera until the feed cut to black. Then, just static. I closed the video. Miranda said nothing. She didn't have to. We left the records room and made our way back to isolation. From a distance, I saw the containment team surrounding Dana's room. One of the men had a tablet connected to some kind of remote IV system. Another adjusted something inside a black case with zippered pouches and syringes. The door to Dana's room never opened fully, just enough for a mechanical arm to extend inward. I asked Miranda what they were doing. "They're administering chemical halt protocols," she said. "Paralytic cocktail followed by subdermal neural shock, designed to shut down limbic override. She'll stop moving." "Is she still alive?" I asked. She didn't answer. When they were done, they marked her status chart with a red tag labeled "Resolved Non-Returnable" and placed a barcode sticker over her patient ID. The body was left restrained and silent. No attempts to revive. No report to the coroner. Just a single line entered into the internal log. "Unit transferred, RD oversight complete." Then they left. No questions. No thanks. No interest in what Miranda had seen or recorded. I tried to photograph the badge one of them wore, but the laminated plastic was blank. Literally blank. White surface. No numbers. No barcode. Not even a name. Before they reached the elevator, I stopped one. I asked who they were with. He looked at me for a second. Not aggressive. Just flat. "You're not on the list," he said. Then he turned and disappeared behind the closing doors. That's when Miranda told me the worst part. "This wasn't the first team," she said. "We had one here last October. A different case. Just one patient. Same symptoms. They came at night. Took her. And no one ever followed up. I didn't recognize it then. I thought it was rare. But now..." She paused. I could see something coming apart in her. Something small, but central. "They've been doing this for months, Riley. Not just here. I have colleagues in St. Louis and Portland. 2 similar cases in each. We thought they were chemical exposure cases. But there's no origin point. No contamination. The symptoms appear, escalate, and then get silenced." Back in her office, I made a copy of the flash drive's contents to a separate portable hard drive I carried in my shoulder bag. I didn't trust the hospital machines. Not anymore. The drive clicked softly as it transferred the files, one folder after another, each labeled with names of cities, hospitals, protocols, all tied together by the same underlying design. An expectation that this would happen, that it would begin somewhere, that it would not be announced. When I left the hospital that night, I didn't go straight home. I parked 2 blocks away in an alley behind a shuttered bar and wrote down every single detail while it was still fresh. Miranda gave me one final warning before I left. They're going to come back, Riley, and not just for her. That night, from the safety of my car, I watched as the same SUV that had arrived earlier drove past me again. Slower this time. No headlights, no sirens. Just the sound of its tires grinding against the wet pavement and the steady crawl of something that wasn't in a hurry because it knew it was already ahead. I sank deeper into my seat and didn't move until they turned the corner and disappeared into the dark. I stayed in the alley longer than I'd planned, not because I was scared to move, though I was, but because something in my head kept circling back to what I'd seen on the flash drive. The images, the simulations, the document timelines. This wasn't a sudden outbreak. This was a mapped sequence. Dana had been part of it. So had Jeremy Cole. And now the hospital had been scrubbed clean, the way you prep a stage before tearing it down. The city outside the hospital still looked normal. Cars passed. A few late-night delivery bikes zipped down side roads. Streetlights buzzed with that faint amber flicker Brighton never got around to upgrading. I thought about heading back to my apartment, but something pulled me the other way. I remembered a friend, Chris Yoon, a junior assignment editor I used to work with at the Daily Lantern. Back when we still had budgets, Chris and I used to split leads. He'd watch for strange shifts in local records or emergency service calls, and I'd follow up in person. He was sharp, skeptical, and just paranoid enough to never trust a single source story. I pulled out my phone and texted him something simple. Still in the field. You see anything weird tonight? He replied 3 minutes later with just, "Where are you?" That got my attention. I called. Chris picked up after one ring. The line had that hiss you only get when someone's using a burner or rooting through something they don't want traced. "I saw your name in the retraction list," he said. "Your press login was pulled this afternoon. You're marked as non-credentialed now." I leaned forward in the driver's seat. "What list?" "The city's internal press wire, same one we use to check for access clearances on scene. You're red-listed. Potential disruptor of municipal stabilization messaging. That's new. I've never even seen that phrasing before." I told him what I'd seen. Dana, the team in containment suits, the flash drive. Not everything, not yet. Just enough to paint the edges of it. He exhaled sharply. "That lines up. We got told to pull 3 pieces in the last 6 hours. One from Memorial East about a patient who attacked an ER tech, another from a school lockdown due to violent illness, and one from a hazmat call that was flagged as a training error, even though the video clearly showed biomed teams entering an apartment complex with real gear. When we asked for follow-up, we got legalese and a signed memo from City Risk Management. The same paragraph repeated 3 times. No reportable incident confirmed. No civilian risk. Do not publish until cleared." He went quiet for a second. I sent a draft story out through a side channel. Just some raw footage and an open source pull request. 30 minutes later, my work email locked me out. Phone rang. The voice said, "This is not your jurisdiction." That's it. That's all they said. I asked him if he was still at the newsroom. Hell no. I'm sitting in my car across from a city water station on 9th. They were loading unmarked drums into a refrigerated truck an hour ago. I was going to follow it, but then I saw someone watching me through the mirror. There was silence between us for a moment. Both of us staring into the dark on opposite ends of the city, phones pressed to our ears, knowing we were talking through the last pieces of what we used to think of as normal. Then Chris said something that cut through all of it. "They're not just hiding it, Riley. They're piloting it, managing the optics. This isn't a response. It's a campaign." He told me he was going to disappear for a few days, maybe leave town, maybe send everything he had to a foreign outlet. I told him to stay off networks, not to trust anything tied to city servers, and to delete his cloud accounts if he hadn't already. "Take care of yourself, man," he said, "and if you make it out of this, tell the truth, even if it's too late." The call dropped. Not ended, dropped. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I stepped out of the car and looked around. Nothing unusual on the street. Just a quiet city pretending everything was still fine. A couple on a late walk. The hum of a distant bus. I almost convinced myself I could go home, make coffee, and pretend I hadn't seen anything irreversible. But then, at exactly 8:43 p.m., The noise began. It started with the emergency alert tone, sharp, high, mechanical. The same one used for amber alerts or storm warnings. Every phone on the street buzzed at once. I heard at least 5 tones ring out from apartment windows, car dashboards, and someone's pocket down the block. My own screen lit up. Emergency civilian safety message issued by United States Department of Public Health and Safety. A severe airborne flu-like illness has been detected in the region. Symptoms may include fatigue, light sensitivity, disorientation, nausea, confusion, or aggression. All residents are instructed to return home immediately and remain indoors until further notice. Do not visit hospitals or clinics unless directed by emergency services. Further instructions will be broadcast via television, radio, and mobile networks. Do not panic. This is a precautionary measure. People on the street stopped walking. Some stared at their screens. A man in a work vest crossed himself. A mother pulled her child closer. No one screamed. That was the strangest part. There was a kind of quiet, as if the city collectively realized something had shifted, some threshold passed, and now we were living in a different version of the same place. The message repeated on the storefront TVs, on public service billboards, over radio chatter leaking from someone's cracked window. All of it echoed the same phrases: return home, remain indoors, airborne flu-like symptoms, until further notice. But I knew better. I had seen what it looked like when someone lost their humanity from the inside out. I had seen Dana die, and then something else stand up inside her skin. This wasn't flu, and this wasn't panic control. I started the car and merged onto the main road, ignoring the navigation voice trying to reroute me around traffic. There wasn't any, at least, not yet. The city had fallen quiet again, the kind of quiet that makes you lean forward in your seat like you're driving through fog, expecting something just beyond the next light. I didn't go home. I went to my mother's apartment. She lived in Westfield Terrace, a senior housing complex on the edge of the city grid, just past the old freight line. I hadn't told her everything, only that I was coming to pick her up. She didn't argue. She never did when I used that tone. The closer I got to the western side of Brighton, the stranger the city felt. At first, it was subtle. Unlit storefronts, empty intersections, a missing bus that should have passed 15 minutes ago. Then came the shapes. People just standing still. I saw a man at the edge of a gas station lot, staring at the roofline, motionless. Across the street, a woman in a nurse's uniform was standing in the middle of a turning lane, facing east, arms slack at her sides, head tilted up toward nothing. None of them moved when I passed. Not a twitch, not a blink, as if something had removed the command to respond. A few blocks later, I saw more. 3, maybe 4 people standing in a triangle at the center of a grocery store parking lot. One of them was barefoot, wearing hospital scrubs with the pants soaked to the thigh. Another stood directly under a flickering street lamp, arms raised halfway, as if halfway through a gesture. Paused mid-thought. Still no sound. Just the hum of streetlights and the occasional tire squeal from blocks away. Something was breaking across the city like a pressure wave. Not loud, not immediate, but complete. At 6th and Harper, I slowed to take a detour. That's when I hit the first block post. 2 police cruisers nose to nose at an intersection. No lights, no flashing sirens. Just 2 officers in dark coats standing outside. One holding a traffic wand, the other a portable radio. A third stood back near a city utility truck parked crosswise to block the alley. They weren't waving people through. They were funneling drivers off the main artery. As I approached, the officer with the wand pointed to my window and motioned me to stop. I rolled it down halfway. He didn't ask for ID, didn't ask where I was going. He just said, "All southbound traffic's being diverted east. You need to turn around now." I told him my mother lived 6 blocks away, and I wasn't going farther. He didn't move. Behind him, the other officer muttered something into his radio and nodded. The man at my window leaned down slightly. "There's civil unrest on that side of the zone. We're holding until assessment units clear it." That was the first time I heard the word zone. I asked if anyone had been hurt. He hesitated. His eyes flicked to the left, then back to me. We've had incidents, some injuries. Stay on municipal roads and return home. This area will be secured shortly. Behind the blockade, I saw something flicker in the distance. An orange glow just past the trees. Could have been a car fire. Could have been something worse. I wasn't waiting to find out. I nodded, shifted the gear into reverse, and backed up just far enough to reach a side lot. The officer didn't follow. None of them did. They weren't looking for confrontation. They were containing something they didn't want to name. I took a parallel street through a residential grid that curved through old apartment complexes and overgrown green spaces. The sidewalks were littered with trash bins left mid-collection, and bikes dropped without their kickstands. One sedan was parked at a 45-degree angle against the curb, both front doors wide open, dome light still on. No one inside. At one point, I passed a group of people walking up the road. Not together, not hurried, just moving in the same direction like they had received the same unspoken instruction. A man in a business suit with a cut across his collar. A teenage girl holding a gardening spade. An elderly woman in a housecoat dragging a rolling suitcase behind her that bumped and scraped with every few feet. Their heads turned slightly as I passed, but none of them reacted. I avoided eye contact. I turned onto Elbridge and finally spotted the familiar grey stone of Westfield Terrace. The gate was still open, and the security booth was empty. One of the two outer lights had been smashed, glass scattered across the sidewalk, and the wooden post cracked. I parked near the back entrance, took the stairs instead of the elevator. On the second floor, I saw a trail of red footprints down the hall. One of the doors had been broken in and left ajar. The numbers had been torn off. I didn't stop to look. My mother's unit was still closed, but one of the glass panels beside the door had spidered, as if something had hit it hard from the inside. I knocked in the pattern we'd used during winter storms when I was a kid. 3 short, 2 long. I heard her unlock it. She opened the door just wide enough to see who it was, then pulled me in quickly and deadbolted behind us. "I packed a bag," she said. "I've been watching the news. They're saying it's airborne, like SARS." I looked around the room, tidy, lit with battery lanterns, and one working lamp connected to a backup inverter. She had prepped more than I expected. Bottled water, dry goods, her medical papers stacked and sealed in a Ziploc. "I tried calling earlier," she said. "It kept dropping." I told her we had to leave now, that the city was fracturing, and the official alerts were only half the story. She didn't ask for details. She just nodded. We stepped into the hallway just as a scream echoed from downstairs. A sharp, wet sound, then a crash of something hitting tile. My mother froze. I pulled her toward the stairs. We descended quietly, stepping over a fallen umbrella and an overturned walker. In the lobby, a man stood facing the vending machine, motionless. The glass was cracked. He wasn't buying anything. He wasn't moving, just standing there, hands pressed to the surface. He turned his head slowly as we passed, but never said a word. Outside, I loaded my mother into the passenger seat and started the engine. She looked at me with a calm she used to wear when I was a kid, and didn't know the world could break. "Where are we going?" I told her we'd find a place outside the city limits, somewhere with fewer lights, somewhere quiet. As we drove, the alerts resumed, this time on radio, on television screens glowing through apartment windows, on LED road signs. "Remain in your home. Avoid contact with symptomatic individuals. Do not approach emergency responders unless instructed. Further updates will be issued by the Department of Civil Safety." The voice was the same across all channels, smooth, generic, detached. Then the message changed. Due to increasing reports of unprovoked violence and suspected airborne spread of unknown contagion, the city of Brighton is entering emergency shelter-in-place status until further notice. This is not a drill. All residents must return to their homes immediately. Law enforcement will enforce compliance. No travel permitted after 12 a.m. We had 1 hour. I glanced at my mother. She didn't flinch. We just drove on. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.